Thanks for giving me time. Matthew, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. Where I was until I got here. No.
So you've been trying to raise taxes on childless cat ladies for for a long time now.
We don't know how the incentive will work altogether, but we're going to try it anyway. Yeah.
No. But so I mean, how do you think about it? I think that J.D. Vance has elucidated that there's, an economic dimension to these tax policy things, but there's also a kind of a cultural conversation about family and children, and you can get, I guess we're calling it weird about it if you're him. But I mean, how should Democrats think about these kind of questions of family economics?
Well, one way to think about it is that J.D. Vance has been absolutely nowhere on this issue until the last few weeks. I mean, I wrote the tax credit bill with Sherrod Brown and with Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. I'm not sure where all those people have ended up, but I know that she was there at the beginning, has been an advocate ever since. I've never heard him advocate for it. Certainly didn't see him try to get the Republicans to stop the Republicans from denying it. And I do think, to me, Matt, what's been instructive in this debate has been how hard it has been to get full refundability of the tax credit. Because it's as if they want us to prove that full refundability, which goes to people, at $0 of their income, is a disincentive to working, And to me, even if you just look at the people that are getting the credit that we know about, the vast majority of them are working. I mean, to the tune of like 90%, if you include grandparents, if you include other people. And there are people who have to stay home to take care of kids, which is why it's a good idea to have full refundability, especially for kids that are young. So to me, I think their fight against full refundability, based on the idea that we're going to disincentivize work that goes back to a kind of a 1980s view of what the American economy looks like, betrays the lack of attention or the lack of care they have for American families. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope next year, when we are being confronted with the idea, if we want to extend tax cuts for rich people, 65% of those tax cuts going to the top 5% of Americans, and we're going to borrow from every single working family in America to finance those tax credits, that in the face of that, they could be incentivized to vote for a fully refundable tax credit that would cut childhood poverty in half in this country.
So you mentioned borrowing there to pay for it, and this is something I've been wondering about. When Bill Clinton was president, when Barack Obama was president, deficit reduction was, I think, a major Democratic Party theme. These days, a lot of people are worried about their mortgage rates. A lot of people in the clean energy sector are worried about the interest rates, and I haven't really seen the Biden administration focus on fiscal responsibility in the same kind of way that the last two Democratic presidents have. And I mean, do you think is that a mistake?
I think that it is. I won't describe it as a mistake. I'll say that when interest rates were zero for as long as they were, which, by the way, this is a whole other set of issues about whether how much damage the Federal Reserve did by keeping rates at zero. One of the worries that I really have living in Colorado is that no one can afford a house anymore, in part because the asset inflation the Federal Reserve caused by keeping stuff at zero for as long as it did. But I do think that when rates are where rates are, it makes a lot of sense to think about doing some deficit reduction. And in my view, for the tax policy or the tax debate next year, I think we should be all about reversing the Trump tax cuts for the rich. I think we should be trying to have as robust a child tax credit as possible. I think Democrats, not Donald Trump, should be for simplifying our tax form so Americans can fill it out with three swipes of a telephone. And I think the proceeds of that should be used to pay down our deficit, because every single American will benefit from that. And I don't know how people who are going to be subject to the higher rates because they're the wealthiest people in America, can be heard to complain if we really are serious about using the proceeds for deficit reduction, as opposed to spending it on other stuff besides the child tax credit, which I think needs to be fully dealt with.
But you're saying edit the agenda down, right?
Yeah,
Child tax credit.
right. That's what I would say.
Right. I talked with Senator Murphy about immigration before. I think the other issue where Trump is seen as having a big advantage right now is energy. And Colorado's a fossil fuel producing state. And I wonder, I mean, is this something that Democrats should open their hearts and minds to more, the benefits of oil and gas production?
First of all, I can't not say one word about immigration.
All right.
Is that all right? I was part of the Gang of Eight in 2013. If you look at the 4 Democrats and the 4 Republicans who negotiated the last comprehensive immigration bill, if you look at the polling that the Wall Street Journal just published on the front page of that illustrious newspaper, you will find that the American people, when asked about how to solve this problem, I'm not talking about members of Congress, I'm talking about the American people. The Gang of Eight bill is what they say they want. They want a secure border. They want to pass the DREAM Act. They want to fix the broken visa system so we actually have a functional immigration system, which, by the way, is a huge advantage to us. There is nobody crawling over the Gobi Desert to get into Beijing. They still want to come to the United States of America, and they want a secure border. $40 billion is what we were going to spend in the Gang of Eight bill. It makes Trump's wall look like a pittance. But we weren't spending it on medieval technology, his wall. We were spending it on 21st century technology that would have allowed us to see every inch of the border. So what I'm saying is, I know there are a lot of people who say, you got to do it in these little pieces. I think the American people are totally out of patience with the inability of a Congress to even do a border-only bill, much less do the stuff that actually will drive economic growth. On the energy question, I totally agree. There is no country in the world better situated than the United States to lead the global transition to net zero. Let's pick a date, 2050. No one is better set up than the United States because of our abundant fossil fuels, because of our abundant renewables, because we are relatively less corrupt than these other societies that are petro-states. We're not a petro-state, and we have incredible innovation. You know, if you made anybody in here a king for a day and said, or a week, and said, you get to pick one country in the world to set out a 25-year vision for what this transition should look like, this would be the country you would pick to be in charge of. And our politics has kept us from doing it. And on the Republican side, what you hear people say is drill, baby, drill. That's not what we want in Colorado. That's not what the American people want. And on the other side, you hear people say, don't be for like making natural gas as clean as possible because that's an admission somehow that natural gas will be here for a while. Neither of those positions are persuasive with the American people. What they would like to see is, forgive the word, an industrial policy, an energy policy that shows that we can show that kind of leadership, that it'll be good for our national security, that will dislodge Putin's ability to sell, his gas around the world, including into Europe, and that we could start to measure emissions reductions, unlike the policy we have today, which is just continuing to allow emissions to run wild.
So do you think the vice president should consider breaking with the decision to stop LNG export terminals?
Well, I thought that was a terrible decision when it was made. It sent a message, all throughout Pennsylvania that didn't make any sense there. And it's up to her to decide whether she's going to break with it or not. But I saw some things in the last few days or so that suggested that that we were going to have an approach that was more inclusive of the. And by the way, Matt, for me, this has nothing to do with the fact that Colorado has fossil fuels, which you pointed out. It has to do with the fact that the American people have not been given a believable vision of what this should look like. You know, when we say to people, there's going to be what is it, noble transition, or, you know, what
A
is
just transition?
Well, a just transition, or, you know, what they're hearing is, we're going to put you out of business. What they're hearing is that there is no credible plan, you know, to be able to show them that we can have an energy policy to take us from the abundant but problematic burning of fossil fuels today to a place where we're literally setting the standard for the entire world to get to net zero, which we can. And no other country in the world can. And in that vision, what we're doing in 2050 is exporting lots of clean energy all over planet Earth that's going to benefit us and benefit the countries that we're exporting it to. Something I doubt very seriously that Beijing is really going to be in a position to compete with us on. There's a huge opportunity for us here. That's a good news story.
And how does this permitting legislation fit into that?
Well, let me, on the first part, say also, none of what I say matters unless you're managing net, you know, to a place where we're net zero. So you have to, this is not a mission, I'm not asking people to compromise on their climate principles, quite the opposite. I'm asking us to adopt a set of policies that will make it more likely to get to the climate principles that we want. And on the export, on the regulatory, permitting side, yeah, we got to make it easier to build stuff all over the United States of America. Energy is a big part of that. Housing is obviously a huge part of that too. Housing is the biggest pain point right now in the state of Colorado. There is no place for any working people to live that's near their job. When I was the superintendent of schools, which I was before I was in this job, I never met a teacher that didn't live in Denver. You know, that was one of the awesome things about teaching in Denver. Unlike Seattle or San Francisco, you could actually live in Denver. And today, not a single teacher can afford to live in Denver. They can't even live in the inner suburbs of Denver. So now we're saying, for you to have the privilege of taking this incredibly underpaid job, that's this incredibly difficult job that we don't respect sufficiently, we're now going to make you travel an hour and a half every day, or 2 hours, to teach. I mean, we got to fix it, and a big part of that is regulation, although I think the Fed, as I said earlier, had a lot to do with it too.
So you mentioned you were schools chancellor. You were an education reform schools chancellor. I think we have some veterans of the education reform world here. That's really kind of fallen off as a topic in the national debate. I mean, do Democrats need to, at least some of you, like, get back to some of this, get a little more real about what's going on in school systems?
We do. Look, we have a system in this country of public education that is ratifying the income and wealth inequality that we have in this nation. It's ratifying. It's not liberating kids from their circumstances. And by the way, we have the worst income and wealth inequality of any industrialized country in the world, of any size. We have the worst economic mobility of any country in the world. The schools are more segregated than they were when I was graduating from high school. And we have no agenda as a nation for our schools. I would propose one, which is that I think we ought to be able to assure ourselves that every kid that graduates from high school graduates with the skills to earn a living wage, not the skills to earn a minimum wage. I think that's something we could measure in ways that would be much more useful than the tests that we used under No Child Left Behind, and it would cause us to completely realign the incentives that we have now, which are completely misaligned from from the outcomes that we want. It doesn't solve every problem. The fact that we're still paying teachers in a system that was designed when we had a labor market that discriminated against women and said you have two choices, one's being a teacher and one's being a nurse, come teach Julius Caesar every year for 30 years in the Denver public schools. That is the system of payment we have today, and we haven't changed that. We have to change that. You know, the fact that that we have no high-quality preschool education in America, really, to speak of, is another thing we have to change. So there's no shortage of policy space here, but I think that that idea of getting high school kids to that point would unify Republicans and Democrats all over this country, and unaffiliated voters as well, because they see the need to do it, and they're deeply skeptical of the ROI that people are getting on a college degree. The good news is that if you have the skills to earn a living wage when you graduate from high school, by definition, you have the skills to succeed in college. So, you know, it's a good outcome all the way around.
All right. Well, someday I hope to do a whole education interview with you, but I think we're out of time here.
All right.
So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
time.
Thank you, everybody.